So let me start. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, wherever you are in the world. A very warm welcome to this webinar on developing climate responsive agricultural extension and advisory services, lessons, and opportunities. This webinar is hosted by the Enabling Farmers for Agricultural Transformation project. The EFAT project is funded by USAID and is being implemented by Winrock International. Its focus is on strengthening extension and advisory services globally. My name is Stoney David. I'm the project director for the EFAT project. And my role in this webinar is a simple one. It's simply to introduce to you the moderator. Today, we are being hosted by Colin Quinn. The planned moderator, unfortunately, could not join us. But so we have Colin. Colin Quinn is Winrock's technical advisor for climate smart market systems. In this role, Colin works to integrate climate change challenges in projects to improve overall resilience of vulnerable communities and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Prior to joining Winrock, Colin led the climate change team in USAID's Africa Bureau. He has nearly 2 decades of experience working in the US and internationally in ecological research and climate change. Over to you, Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Sony, and thanks everyone for being here. I see we have 112 participants and people are still trickling in. I'll just reiterate what Sony said. This is a webinar on developing climate responsive agriculture extension and advisory services, lessons learned and opportunities. So if that's not what you're looking for, you're in the wrong place. I'm just going to briefly introduce the topic and then hand it over to our first speaker. I think as we all know at this point, climate change is affecting everyone and all that we do on the planet. And this is particularly true in lower and middle income countries, and especially for smallholder farmers in those communities that rely on rain-fed agriculture. Before this webinar, I was reviewing the 6th assessment for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which came out in 2022. And there was a stat that jumped out at me that said that 34% that agriculture has been reduced by 34% since 1961 in Africa. And that's more than any other region. And I think this really highlights not only food security challenges, but exacerbating and making challenges worse that already exist in lower and middle income countries. And to add to that, often in these countries, agriculture and land use change are the largest contributors to climate change. So we have a real challenge on our hands. But I think there's good news. Oftentimes when we talk about climate change, it's a lot of doom and gloom. I think the good news is there's methods we could do to alleviate these challenges, and that's what we're going to talk about today. You know, we can do things to improve farmers' resilience. We can do things to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve farmers' income, quality of life, things like that. And one way we can do that is through agriculture extension and services. So that's the topic for today. Really looking forward to hearing from our 2 speakers. A bit of the agenda. So we have 2 speakers. I'm going to introduce our first speaker. He's going to have about 10 or 15 minutes to talk. Then I'm going to introduce our second speaker, and she's going to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then we'll have a conversation with the audience. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A icon in Zoom, and we'll monitor that during the presentations. Also, we will share this recording in about a week when it's available. And we're also working on a report, an evidence-based report on the role of extension services to address climate change. We're finishing up that report now, and when we finish soon, we'll share that with all the participants and those who registered. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our first speaker, Dr. Rashid Solomon. Dr. Rashid is the director for the Center for Research on Innovation and Science Policy in Hyderabad, India. He has over 30 years of experience in the field on extension systems and applications of agriculture innovation systems and frameworks. He currently serves as the focal point for the Agriculture Extension in South Asia network, and that's part of the Global Forum for Rural Advisory Services. So without further ado, over to you, Dr. Solomon.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rashid Suleiman, and many thanks, Colin, for introducing me to the audience. I'm hired by the EFAT program to develop an evidence review, to organize an evidence review on what is the role of extension and advisory services in supporting climate adaptation and mitigation. And we looked at this evidence review with the following set of objectives. One is trying to document the current state of support extension and advisory services provide in terms to especially to smallholder farmers in developing countries on helping them to adapt to the climate change and contribute to mitigation. Second, and is about finding out what are the gaps, what are the capacity gaps at the organizational level as well as at the extension provider level that needs to be addressed if they have to provide an effective support to farmers. And also we are trying to understand the kind of a policy issues, policy gaps that needs to be addressed if advisory services have to play a really major contribution to climate change adaptation and mitigation. As we all know, agriculture has been adversely affected. One of the sectors that have been adversely affected by climate change. And small farmers are the most vulnerable and they are the most affected. So we need to support them in terms of adapting to this change. It could be by means of helping them to change their existing practices or maybe using new technology. So there is an adaptation. So this is what we call as adaptation. And the other is about, as Colin also mentioned, because agriculture sector is also one of the major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. So we also need to support farmers to ways of reducing these greenhouse gas emissions and also help in enhancing the carbon sinks. That is called as the mitigation. So these are the two key terms which we are using in this review. Another related term is the use of extension and advisory services, increasingly called as rural advisory services. Here we are talking, one is the pluralism, because we are talking more about not only about a public sector extension agent visiting farmers and talking about new technologies. We are dealing with a more diverse set of providers from the private sector, the NGO sector, civil society sector, farmers organizations, private consultants, individual, I would say, ICT providers. So this whole sector is highly pluralistic now. And they provide a wide range of services, not merely disseminating new knowledge about agricultural technologies, but they also organize farmers as groups to deal with many of these new issues, including access to markets or even dealing with the natural resource management issues. So this is something, so we have a much more broader understanding, definition of advisory services, and we also recognize the pluralism in the extension advisory service provision. And in this process, we reviewed, I think using the kind of the keywords which we have indicated, we reviewed about more than 500 documents using this Google Scholar and Web of Science. And we could find that now we have a lot of more information from the interregional. There are publications that talk about in general across countries, across continents. And we have more studies from Africa and Asia, and we have probably less from the Latin America and the rest of the world. Coming to the findings of the review, this is the first of the major finding is about what are the roles played by advisory services in climate change adaptation and mitigation. We have grouped it in terms of the blue on the top as adaptation. The below is mostly about in black is about the mitigation. But I think it should be noted that some of the actions in which we are doing in adaptation contributes to mitigation and mitigation contributes to adaptation. So these are not exactly watertight kind of compartments. So first one in terms of delivering climate advisory services. I think this is where we are integrating the climate information with the crop status and providing farmers with a crop advisory on what needs to be done. So this is many times the agriculture experts develop this crop advisory and extension try to promote it through its different means. For instance, in Senegal, we have examples of community radio being used to promote this weather crop advisory. In many countries, it is being provided through SMS, through the mobile phone kind of advisory services. Second is about promoting seeds of stress-tolerant crops. Researchers have developed several varieties of drought tolerance, maybe flood tolerant, salt tolerant varieties of different crops. For instance, the drought tolerant maize in Africa, which has been developed by CIMIT in collaboration with the national partners. So these are being promoted by extension agents. For instance, we have seen in Malawi, it is the DTMA is being promoted by the public extension system through organizing farmer demonstrations. Same happens in South Asia with the IRI stress-tolerant rice varieties, and this being promoted by the state departments of agriculture, the extension machinery to a large number of people, that making them adopt these technologies. Another is about the supporting farmers to adopt alternative farming practices, because we have been talking about regenerative, organic, natural farming. So there is a wide range of approaches currently we have been using, which are more sustainable, climate friendly, and using less agrochemicals. For instance, in India, it is the government is promoting the natural farming through the different state departments of agriculture, the public extension system. So they are being trained on these technologies so that they talk to the farmers about it. Other is about the promoting climate resilient value chains. This is where many of the agribusiness companies, they are basically under pressure to comply with their sustainability commitments. So because it's also related to their certification, because what is the kind of a carbon, what is their the damage, or maybe what is the extent of damage they create when they try to produce a kind of a product? What is the reduction in carbon which they are trying to? So they work along the value chain, trying to link up with the farmers, and they use advisory service as a tool to helping farmers to adopt better sustainable agricultural practices. There are examples from where TechnoServe is doing it in Peru with the cocoa value chain. Similarly, in Ghana, the Tautan is also trying to promote good agricultural practices in the whole cocoa value chain, so that they reduce their kind of energy use and so that they have a very good sustainable kind of a value chain in place. Coming to promoting resource efficient technologies, as we also know, because agriculture contributes a lot to the energy use. So there is a need to reduce the use of fertilizers, energy, water. So there have been a lot of new technologies and approaches that have come, like the alternative wetting and drying. I think this direct seeded rice. So there is also a kind of drip irrigation, promoting organic fertilizers. So there are different ways, and these are also being promoted by the private sector. Many of them are involved, very much involved into these, where they try to demonstrate and train farmers on using, for instance, another is a solar irrigation. So these are all much more energy efficient systems in place. Promoting agroforestry. So because agroforestry has a lot of, which helps in carbon sequestration. We have examples from Indonesia. There have been examples from other countries, even Rabobank. So many of them are actively involved in promoting carbon sequestration through agroforestry projects. Other is about supporting mitigation through market-based mechanisms, carbon trading, which is an emerging kind of an area where firms are paying farmers for the carbon which they are sequestering in the soil. Similar is the kind of payment for ecosystem services. So where at the higher end, at the higher ranges, when water is being, when you do more reforestation and help in retaining water. So the lowland consumers are willing to pay for some of these. Similarly, governments are also trying to promote, in some cases, farmers who are growing indigenous crop varieties, because they are much more tolerant to climate stress and use little inputs and have several other multiple benefits. And the last one is about promoting social inclusion, because women, indigenous communities, especially small farmers, they are all the ones who are mostly affected. And for example, trying to promote community seed banks, so that and supporting them with resources to organize seed fairs, exchange seeds among the different kind of farmers. So these are all being done to help women, so that they have more access to the kind of seeds. Similarly, they have been also examples of promoting groups of women entrepreneurs who produce seeds at the local level. so that no, these seeds are available of stress tolerant varieties are available with the kind of a farmers. So there is a lot that is already happening. And advisory services, so they do a number of functions, because I discussed about the roles, but these functions are the ones which they have been performed. For example, creating awareness on adaptation and mitigation through personal visits and advisory. There are also use of social media, demonstrating new technologies and practices, which is very common. For example, whether it's a new varieties or it's a new machinery like a zero till or drip irrigation, developing education and training materials, developing an inventory of resource conservation or inventory of technologies. For example, climate smart technologies, developing inventories, developing training manuals for training farmers, training extension workers, organizing trainings and learning events, enhancing access to inputs. Is not only, so there are also cases where extension is trying to promote decentralized production of biofertilizers, seeds, which I have mentioned earlier. Another is about mobilizing communities for collective action, because most of the climate challenges need community action. Because unless, well, for example, in the case of alternative wetting and drying, only if the rice producers all come together and implement this kind of a technology, then only it will work in that case. Similarly, organizing farmers along the value chain, so they get a better prices, and they can develop a new brand. Maybe much of them are maybe climate smart, certified brands. All of them needs a collective action. Digital decision tools, apps that provides, for example, integrated pest management. Similarly, supporting community rights, stakeholder coordination, because coordination is so important among different organizations in the sector, and policy advocacy, because if you have to upscale many of the new technologies, so you need this kind of policy advocacy, so that the programs are upscaled, the changes are being made, investments are being made. Coming to the areas that need strengthening, because though we say advisory services have been doing all these kind of things, there is areas that need strengthening. For example, technical knowledge on mitigation, especially so in the public sector, because they have, though they are much more comfortable with adaptation, but that is not the case with the mitigation options. This doesn't mean that they all know about all the different technologies available for adaptation. Similarly, the need for strengthening functional capacities, like social mobilization, organizing producers for collective action, designing local adaptation plans, promote lateral learning, or these days we have been talking about co-learning, so that they come together, learn, experiment with the new technologies, make some adaptation to the existing technology, share their experiences. Development of training modules, training of trainers. These are areas where we need to have more investments, efforts have to be made. And inclusion of climate change topics in the extension curricula, not only in the training, but also in the educational, in the universities. This is an area which needs to be strengthened. And other areas are about funding. So we need basically more human and financial support for advisory services. Funding, it's not merely the kind of a public, I'm not merely talking about the public funding, but bilateral, multilateral, climate funds. There's a lot of, and philanthropic funding, because we need to have people on the ground at the last mile. If you really wanted to support, advise, handhold farmers to shift from many of them practicing more unsustainable, chemical intensive kind of a farming to a more agroecological, regenerative agricultural kind of a practices. We need to have more para extension workers, operational funds to organize activities, and then efforts to share experiences, learn from the different countries, from the same country, from different parts. So there is a need for a more knowledge management, digitalization. Coming to the policy support, though advisory services are playing a major role, we believe that no, their roles are not that well accepted or recognized within any of these kind of a policy level documents like adaptation plans or nationally determined contributions. They talk about what each sector should do, but not really in terms of what should be their role. And another problem is that advisory service also lacks climate objectives. So that is another kind of an issue, because there is no advisory services have no I would say no targets, or they have not integrated the kind of a climate change objectives into their kind of a planning. We need to have developed more effective mechanisms for coordination across sectors, for whether it should be biodiversity, forestry, livestock, agriculture, maybe irrigation, land management. And last point is about the decentralized adaptive research support advisory services need for many of these technologies to be evaluated and to identify what should be done in terms of whether these are profitable, to understand the benefit cost ratio. Especially so when we need it, when we are upscaling new technological options. This is my last slide. So this is what we should be wanted to say, that advisory services do really play a role in adaptation and mitigation, but they deserve more support. This is also an opportunity to strengthen advisory services. We need to enhance funding, including access to climate funds, because this is an area where that needs to be explored, because if we can access these kind of resources to support farmers, because by strengthening advisory services, more effective partnerships are needed across value chain, across different actors, strengthen technical functional capacities related to climate change adaptation mitigation, more decentralized adaptive problem solving research support, because extension depends upon the research also for a number of things, and generate and promote evidence on the role of EAS. We need to have more research on what is the role of extension advisory services are playing. And I think I will stop here and thank you very much. And you can, for more information on the project and the reports, all those things that are going to come, I think our focal point is Sony David, who is the project director at EFA. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rashid. Very interesting and helpful information. Just a reminder, we'll do questions after both our speakers talk. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A icon on Zoom, and when you type in your question, which you can do now and we'll address later, but please say where you're calling in from, your role, and who your question is directed at, if anybody. And with that, we'll go to our next speaker. We're very excited to have Lily Kelladorme. Lily's the head of impact and learning at Farmline Limited. This is an agri-tech and digital extension company in Ghana. She guides this strategic planning for Farmline, and she oversees the implementation of Farmline's climate action plan. She also works closely with their engineering team to improve their software platforms. And Lily's contributed and worked with over 30,000 smallholder farmers in Ghana to focus on agriculture innovations and services, particularly through voice messaging. So Lily, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Colin. I want to use this opportunity to thank Winrock for the opportunity to share Farmline's experiences in providing climate advisory services to smallholder farmers. I believe by now you should be able to see my slides.
Yeah, it looks good, Lily.
Okay, all right. So just to start off, I believe we are all here, and on a daily basis, we see how climate change is affecting our lives as citizens or as individuals. This impact is rather felt more in smallholder farmers. Studies by EFAT has shown that over 33 million farmers in Africa actually contributing to the food that is produced globally. However, these farmers, coupled with the challenges of climate change, long dry spells, droughts, flooding, pest invasion, and diseases that are coming up as effects of climate change. With all these effects, they also have challenges that are already existing in the agriculture value chain. For instance, limited or difficulty to access quality, affordable inputs. Also challenges with financing. Also, at the end of the season, because of the effects of climate change, they are not able to achieve high productivity, and so very low output in terms of their yields. And then also the challenge is that even when they have put in a lot of effort during the farming season, at the end of the season, because there are no good infrastructure and systems in place, they lose majority of their produce to post-harvest losses. So at Farmerline, our interest since we're established in 2013 has been to provide support to these farmers to overcome the challenges of climate change, making them more resilient. And so as a company that is technology powered, our focus has been by mainly providing access to these farmers resources that are available, innovation, climate innovations that have been available over the years. Farmers do not have access to this. There's a big gap. So our goal has been to connect farmers to these resources to help them to be more wealthy in terms of how well they do in their farming. And over the years, we've been able to support over 300,000 farmers within Ghana through our farm services, and then also through our technology service platform, which is Merge Data, that was developed internally. We've been able to digitize over 2 million farmers globally, working especially through partners. So a study that was conducted by 60 Decibels in 2022 in Ghana, especially giving us a baseline of how farmers are resilient, gives us a good picture of how farmers are actually battling with climate change. And so it looked at three key areas, which is their ability to adapt, and that is mainly based on their access to knowledge and whether they are even implementing some of these sustainable practices that Rashid had mentioned, like intercropping, water management, the use of organic their access to enablers. So enablers means that they can easily access credits for maybe seeds or fertilizers, and then also they have access to improved seeds and then markets as well. And then they can also easily or readily access advice for their farming. And then the third aspect is the ability to absorb any shocks that may come from climate. So in this year, their reliance on their farm income is it only one crop that they are relying on, or it's diverse, and then also the access to crop insurance and many other coping mechanisms that they are able to use. And the results are alarming. To find that only 30% of farmers were resilient is very low, and this is mainly because of the challenges that they are facing, whether they are applying the information. And I just want to highlight more on the ability to adapt, since that focuses on what we are doing today in this seminar, advisory and extension services. It's mainly circling around are farmers accessing this information and are they able to even apply it? So for Farmerline, our approach has mainly been to provide a holistic support system to these farmers, starting from access to the information. So the education bit is very important. Rashid mentioned how through the review or the research, they found that farmers are getting this access. So the Farmerline is to make the information available to farmers. We do that through two main approaches. We have the in-person, which is the traditional means of educating farmers through farmer-based workshops in the communities, and we have an expert or a trained young person agent who offers this training to the farmers to make the content very practical, and then also for farmers to directly interact with the agents. And then also the second aspect is that we leverage technology, which is our helpline. I'll be talking more about that in the coming slides, to also ensure reinforcement and then making sure that information is readily available to farmers at any time. It is easily reachable to them. And then we use this approach, this 399 ecosystem, to ensure that farmers have access to all these things. So through the 399, farmers can also access climate smart products like input organic fertilizers, irrigation kits. They have access to markets, and then also even assets. And then we are also building partnerships that would allow us to also connect farmers to insurance and then financing opportunities. So just to focus for the purpose of today's webinar, focus more on the digital aspect, which is the Farmerline farmer helpline. This is using our digital tools, which is readily available for farmers to access information. And so what we do is that first, this technology doesn't need a smartphone. You only need a basic feature phone where farmers can just dial a short code, which is in Ghana 399, and in other countries like Cote d'Ivoire is the 1349, for instance. So for farmers to just dial the 399 and then they can access valuable information. So they are able to listen in and then speak to a call center agent who can answer any questions they may have, or they can even access financial literacy information, climate smart practices, especially so around irrigation, how they can practice integrated soil fertility management, and many others. And the way the system is structured is that the messages are in local languages. So if I call, I would either hear three message being recorded or played to me, or in Dagbani or any other local language. So we use two approaches. Farmers can either call in, so which is the inbound, and then access particular information based on their own demand or needs for a particular time. And then we have the outbound where we send messages based on the crop calendar of the season of a particular farmer. You can move on to the next slide. So, all right. So what makes this approach quite different and unique is that we consider the blend of human and digital. We do not exclude digital completely, but we leverage the use of human in making sure that there's that attachment. Also, the languages are in the are very local to the farmers, so they can easily understand. There's clear communication. No information is lost along the way. Once farmers are able to assimilate the information, it will help with bridging any literacy gap, and then they can take action based on the information they've received. And then what it does is it's open to all phone types, so it doesn't only focus on smartphones, which could be a barrier for people to access the information. And once we're able to leverage the push and pull aspect, farmers easily reach out at their own convenience to receive this information. Also, looking at the fact that it is tailored to the crop calendar or the farming season. So farmers receive information that is relevant to them at the particular time in the season. It's the beginning of the year. Farmers are now planning and preparing to plant. They can receive information around soil management, land preparation tips that would be very useful to them to take action on in the coming weeks or months. And then also it is need-based and convenience to the farmers. And then most importantly of it is that we do not just end at providing farmers with information, but also we connect them to agribusinesses or people in the market space or place. For instance, aggregators, input dealers, who can also ensure that for the information they've received, they can also access resources that would help them to implement them, the various practices. So we are trying to connect all the dots so that there's no gap anywhere. So we very much emphasize matchmaking at the end of the day, and that is done through the help of the call center. We also ensure that our approach is gender inclusive and focuses on integrating the youth. And so because of the fact that many young people are interested in technology, we found that a lot of young people are able to easily use the platform or 399 helpline. Also, for women, what we've done is we have made sure that for crops or value chains that are women dominated, like soybean, cowpea, and for other crops, we make sure that these crops or content on these crops are easily available so that farmers who are women can easily access them. We have also been very deliberate about reaching women. So through our workshops, we ensure that our field agents target women. We've been very deliberate about that because For every farmer that you meet, women farmers are at the disadvantage when it comes to access to information and other resources. So we are very deliberate about that as well. And because for the inbound system, farmers can easily call at any time. It helps farmers who, especially with gender roles, they can access the information at any time so that it's not limited by time or space. And so anytime I'm planning for the next day, maybe as a woman, I need to do some chores. After the chores, I can easily call 399 and I can still access any information that I need. All right, so I would want to briefly talk about Colin or Gabe. You can move to the slide on impact. I want to talk briefly about how this has helped farmers that we're working with. So in the previous year, 2023, we've been able to reach over 47,000 farmers who have actively listened to messages, ensuring that they have covered over 80% of the messages that they have called in to receive, and then making a total of 150,000 calls. That is the number of people or number of calls we have received um, accessing or trying to acquire knowledge, which is very massive. Um, and then also, this content has been available in 8 Ghanaian languages, and we have also recorded quite a high listening rate of 84%, which means that, please, you can move to the next slide, which means that when farmers listen, they are able to complete the calls, and majority of them actually listen to the whole message to the end, about 84% of them, and that is very encouraging. That indicates that the messages are engaging, they have interest in it, and it is of essence to them or they find relevance in it. And in terms of some of the practices farmers have reported themselves that they've been able to apply is the use of certified seeds and being able to better store their crops to reduce post-harvest losses. And then in terms of fertilizer application, which is mainly around input optimization, and then also on post-harvest losses, management and savings. And I mentioned that we've been very deliberate about reaching women. And so for the farmers we've been working with, we have about 51% of them being women. And through engagements with them, they have shown that working with them has brought a lot of trust within the work that we do in terms of Farmerline and 399 services. So maybe I would just want to read one quote from a farmer. Because of the good customer service and financial assistance, they are very excited or happy about the service. And then also in terms of how educative the service has been. Maybe just to wrap it up, I would want to talk about um, how the challenges we have faced in delivering these advisory services to farmers. It has not been all that rosy. So for the space that we are working in, when it comes to delivering helpline service to farmers, one of our biggest challenges has been mobile connectivity. The challenge has mainly been that in some of the rural communities that we serve farmers in, it is difficult to reach farmers. And so sometimes you're not able to actually reach the farmers that you want to send the messages to. And one of the things that we've been doing in terms of partnership has been trying to work closely with telcos too, for them to be more responsive wherever we find that maybe towers are down somewhere, they can help us ensure that it is restored. And then also we've realized that a high percentage of women do not have access to phones, and that is a big barrier to them even being able to access, even though they are able to also use um, the phones of other household members. So the good thing about this is even if you don't have a phone, you can use a friend's phone, a child, your spouse's phone to access the information. Um, and then also in terms of some other challenges that we have identified is that yes, farmers receive access to the information, but the key step is taking the action. Are they able to apply the information? Are they able to, if for instance, we taught them about water management? Are they able to practice irrigation? And some of these challenges is because of funding or financing. So what we've been doing is to seek partnerships that would help farmers to access some of these technologies, and then again the matchmaking, making sure that these farmers who call 399 can also easily have an input dealer that they can go to for some of these products that we mentioned in the training, and then also making financing available to farmer-based organizations, working with farmer-based organizations, outgrower businesses, and other established cooperatives. And then finally, one other challenge we've had to address is how we can accurately collect farmer location. Because if you're selling weather forecast, you don't want it to be very generic in terms of the district, but you want it to be near accurate, maybe close to the farmer's farm or home. And so we've been trying to leverage existing tools to ensure that the information we collect around the farmers are very accurate. So I just want to bring this to a wrap. And thank you very much for the opportunity once again. We are happy to connect and talk more about ways to help farmers access advisory services digitally. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lily. And thank you, Rashid. Very interesting presentations. We're getting a lot of questions from the audience. And just a reminder, if you have a question, please type the question Q&A icon in Zoom. Type in your question. Please mention where your organization, where you're calling in from, and your role. Lily, there's several questions for you in the chat about Farmline's business model. So how do you pay for loans? How do you work with farmers? So what is your business model for Farmline?
Right. So we have two main business lines. We have our business to B2B, business to business, and that's through our software platform Merge Data, where we offer that to corporate organizations, to global food traders, to make sure their processes, their operations are very traceable. And so that is the technology aspect. And then we also have farmer services. So these are working through intermediaries like agribusinesses, farmer-based organizations or cooperatives, and input dealers. We are able to also supply or provide farm needs or farm resources to farmers directly. And so that's how we finance our work. So it's either through input or asset financing, market access, and that is even what covers the cost of operating a free 399 service for farmers.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Rashid, I see you're typing answers to questions as we speak. Thank you so much. Just a question for you. What do you think the different roles are performed by public and private extension services?
Actually, both of them are playing different role, supporting adaptation and mitigation. But in most cases, adaptation is the one which most of the public providers are more comfortable, because they have been to a large extent trying to do some of them in terms of promoting stress tolerant varieties. So these are some of the things which they have been anyway doing for a very long time. But when it comes to adaptation, especially with respect to knowledge on resource efficient technologies, carbon trading, payment for ecosystem services, which are much more complex, it is the private sector and specialized NGOs and firms that are trying to provide these services. So that is why I said this is an area where some capacity building has to happen on mitigation in the public sector. But anyway, we need we need everybody, because everybody is bringing different types of knowledge and support to adaptation and mitigation. But this is a major difference.
Thank you. And again, several questions about this particular topic, and this is a question for both of you. How do you reach women and youth? Are women and youth more vulnerable and more need of climate information or extension services? And how do you target specific populations such as women and youth? And it's for both of you, so maybe, I'm not sure, Lily, do you want to go first and then Rashid? Or other way around?
Yeah, so maybe I'll read you the 2 points I made. So the very first one is being very deliberate. So ensuring that we are doing gender targeting. And how we do that is by focusing on particular value chains that we know are mainly dominated by women. For instance, in Ghana, we have the soybean, we have granules, we have cowpea as examples. And so we deliberately ensure that we have information on this. And then also we try to reach them through farmer groups on the ground. And so that's one of the approaches that we use.
Wherever the groups of women exist, where mobilized or indigenous groups are mobilized, it becomes easy trying to identify volunteers or maybe community knowledge workers from the same community who work closely with them, train them, and this is the way we are basically trying to reach. I think India has several examples of going through that kind of a route of identifying local volunteers from these groups as para-extension workers, build their capacities, and use them to reach these communities. So I think that is probably one of the best means to reach these groups. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rashid. Thank you, Lily. Rashid, this question is for you. What do you think the role is for ag extension services and disaster risk management? You know, where you've talked a lot about planning and long-term planning and medium-term planning, but what about disaster risk management? Is there a role? If so, what do you think that role is?
I think there is clearly a role for advisory services, because initially when a disaster strikes, they are the ones who are being sent to assess the type of damage to crops, livestock, and all those kind of a thing. But they also do have a role in post-disaster reconstruction, and I believe they have also a kind of a preparing people for communities for a disaster. I want to give one example, because this EDEN network, this Extension Disaster Education Network, which is a great initiative by the US Cooperative Extension System, has several resources on how do you deal with the disasters. So it's a very useful resource for extension agents worldwide, because many of us look at that site. So it's meant for the US system. So that also clearly shows that no, advisory services should play and can play a major role in disaster management.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the questions. We have about 45 questions. We'll get through as many as we can here in the next few minutes. A question for Lily. How do you get information to farmers, it seems like very efficiently. How do you know, or how do you measure if farmers are adapting or adopting or using that information?
Okay, so yes, it's very important that as you are sharing the information, it doesn't just end there. So deliberately, we have ensured a feedback mechanism. So again, we leverage the call center to reach out to these farmers quarterly, and then also ask them a number of questions about the understanding of the content and how they are using it. Another interesting thing that we do is actually we quiz these farmers. So for let's say a topic on water management or integrated soil fertility management, we have a set of questions that we try to quiz these farmers to see how many of them actually understand or are able to ascertain the information um, they receive. That gives us an indication that, okay, the information is easily understandable. Farmers are able to pick it up and then also use it or transfer it or even share that information with other people. And so we have internal systems that we are able to directly reach out to farmers. And then also through partnership, we are able to have farmer surveys that are conducted more periodically.
Yeah. Kind of a follow-up question to that, Lily. You know, a lot of extension services use either only in-person or technology. Farmerline uses both. Can you talk about why you decided to do that, or why you think both are useful or necessary?
Okay, so I think they are both complementary. This is because we've been using the traditional means of training farmers. Here I'm referring to in-person or workshop face-to-face interactions. You would find that that medium, even though it's very impactful, it's also very cost intensive. So leveraging technology helps you to still transfer the information, but at a manageable cost, right? So we look at how we can combine these two in a nice way that farmers can still receive the information they need. And so, for instance, for an in-person engagement, we look at technical information, things that cannot be really or easily digested on phone, like new concepts. So that's what we try to do. We focus those particular topics for in-person training. And then where you need to emphasize and reinforce the information to ensure that they're actually not forgetting what they have learned, but also remembering to take the action. We leverage the digital or the 399 services throughout the season so that they can take that action. And so nicely blending the two helps to encourage adoption.
Got it. Thank you so much. And this question was addressed to you, Rashid. I think both of you may find this relevant. And Rashid, you've already typed some of this in the answer section, but you know, would you say that extension service agents have enough access to timely climate information to build farmers' resilience, and any challenges around that particular topic? So again, this was addressed to you, Rashid, but Lily, please feel free. You may have similar challenges.
Yeah, actually, in some of the places, it is the the information, the crop advisory information is very generic for a large area. So you cannot really apply it. So it's not a kind of a very user-friendly kind of an advisory. So you need to have more decentralized crop advisory. That means you need to have more decentralized data on weather patterns and also on the crop status. So that is a challenge, but I think many countries are trying to address it so that the level of precision, so they are trying to improve by every year they are trying to improve. So I think this is an issue that gets sorted over a period of time, and with better connectivity, better mobile connectivity and internet connectivity, these issues will be addressed, hopefully.
So for my end, I think in terms of weather, we leverage third party and some weather stations. But I think from our end, the biggest challenge could be like weather forecasting, because, for instance, because of climate change, farmers cannot really predict like they used to when would be the best time to plant and so on. So having accurate forecast, weather forecast, like the longer term one, not the daily or the short term, but having a good, accurate weather forecast for a particular season could be very helpful. That's one challenge that I see.
Yeah, thank you. And Sony, this is actually a question for you. Maybe you can type in the chat and we can put up at the end, but there's several questions about how to connect with EFAT, how to, you know, potentially exchange the work your program's doing internationally with what's going on in the US. So I think there's opportunities there. Just want to note that for you, Sony, in the chat. And then Lily, well, both for you and Rashid, how can you duplicate these models? You know, Lily, you're talking specifically about Ghana, but how can you duplicate models in other countries? And do you think, are there challenges? How do you think about local context? And yeah, is it possible to duplicate these models?
No, I think the first thing is that we need to have more evidence, more examples. We need to strengthen the whole knowledge management around this climate change adaptation mitigation, especially the role of advisory services. And there could be possibilities to learn from the different experiences from different countries. So I think we need to invest probably in knowledge management and documenting experiences from different countries.
Okay, so from our end, we recently started expanding our helpline services to other parts of Africa. So we currently have the 1349 in Cote d'Ivoire, and then also similar modules in Benin and Togo. And I think that one of the key things is also working with government. So in terms of infrastructure regulations and then also registration to even get your helpline set up. Sometimes I think the challenge is that it could be time consuming or a bit of the bureaucratic processes. And so you're not able to get things done as you anticipate. And then also it's important to learn the local context and then try and localize. One of the experiences we learned was in terms of data collection, some of the challenges we faced when we started scaling to other countries. And so I think it's very key to learn the context that you're scaling into. But also, I think, like Rashid said, knowledge management is very key so that it's easy to replicate such models in other geographies.
Well, thank you so much, Lily, Rashid, and a huge thank you to the audience. Very engaged conversation. I wish we had more time. Unfortunately, we're at time, and I just want to remind everyone that we will be sharing this recording in the next week or so. We'll also be sharing the evidence-based evidence-based study that Rashid mentioned in the coming weeks. And I encourage you to visit the EFAT website, which you can see there, or go to the Winrock website. And also, this is the first of a series of webinars. So we'll be having several more webinars over the coming years, really, and we'll be sure to include you and give you the opportunity to participate. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Rashid. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.